We're here to help you be a great student. You probably speak English since you watched a video in English, but do you want to be monolingual or socialized, or do you hope to be bilingual, or trilingual, or even quadrilingual? I love learning new languages. It opens so much of the world to me. I speak English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian, so I have some experience that I can share with you. How do you get at speaking another language? If you've chosen second language is brand new to you, you first recognize it. First, what does the written language look like? Let's pull up a page in Wikipedia. They have nice feature where they can look at a subject in many different languages. What do you notice? Does it use the same alphabet as English? Can you tell the difference between related languages like French and Italian? Observe the different use accent or special characters. Now, this next part is harder. What does this language sound like? International cinema is a great way to be exposed to new languages in real situations. You may find that initially it just sounds like an intelligible blur, but eventually you recognize where sentences end, and then you can start to pick out individual words. You train in your ear to know what's expected in the new language. You might feel most comfortable learning from a textbook, and that's perfectly fine. You do feel a sense of satisfaction each time you finish a chapter. How do you pick a textbook? You could only go online and see what textbook they are using at school you admire. Ask advice from friends who have studied the language before. You might even loan just some book. If you do get a textbook, try to find one that has extra material like audio recordings. The more ways you expose to the language, the better. But what's even more effective is making your own study materials. We recommend situational learning. Think about the situation you find yourself in and what you like to be able to say and understand in the new language. This adds a touch of personal motivation to be able to handle yourself in public. For instance, you're visiting Barcelona and you really want hot chocolate and churros. How do you ask for help? Picking a cafe, finding it on a map, catching a tram, ordering and paying for you when you finish. This is a very specific scenario with typical sentences that use specialized vocabulary. I doubt you're going to find this at a chapter in a textbook, but if it's important to you that you've been able to handle this language, start here. Prepare your scenario referring to textbook or phrasebook, or even better, with help of a native to write out a dialogue and a list of vocabulary. Practice with friends, and of course, don't forget the power of broadcast. Having the confidence to be able to handle yourself in one scenario to another and another. This scenario will give you an anchor to wrap onto when you are in a new situation. Now that you know how to buy a ticket for the tram, it will be much easier when you have to buy tickets for the bus or train. If you know how to buy things in department store, this scenario ties into many others. To make your language learning really robust, along with learning scenario, you should also learn the basic rule of grammar. These will come more easily to you when you have a set of 20 to 50 sentences you're already very familiar with. Notice how sentences construction in the new language differ from English. Other words share the same order, adjective, noun, verb, adverb, or are they in inverted compare with what you are familiar with? Does it go noun, adjective, You can form back on those sentences you already know very well from the scenario, and those will help you make sense of the grammar rule. In this way, with focused study, you can learn a lot on your own. Of course, there are really no substitute for immersion, listening and speaking language with native speakers with no English interruption. For many years, depending on where you live, it will be very hard to do this. Imagine trying to learn Spanish in, say, Minnesota or Stockholm. You have to look really hard to find someone to talk with. I actually moved to Italy and became fluent in Italian. Now, thankfully, you can do immersion online. You can join classes and talk to native speakers all without leaving your house. We recently learned about Lingoda, an online language learning service, and we thought we give it a try. Lingoda lets you work with group classes or individual tutors who are native speakers. Group classes are a little less expensive and may be a good way to be easier to learn a new language, as well as give you a chance to meet other people who you could practice with. You start a Lingoda with assessment test to place you at the right level of instruction, and then you progress your own speed, taking classes on your own schedule. You can start at an absolute beginner and work your way up to fluency. You can even get certification that help you with job. Now let me share with you some tips and tricks I learned to study languages. Tip number 1. Work very hard on your pronunciation. Pronunciation first. Start by imitating what the language sounds like when you watch for a foreign film. You might feel silly, but you have to master the sound of the new language. It may help you to know their finite number of the sounds you to make. For instance, the French phonetic alphabet contains 37 sounds. You can probably pronounce most of them just fine with practice. Usually, people have trouble with just one or two of those sounds. For instance, the French R is nothing like the English R. You have to hold your tongue completely differently. So when you see R written down, it can be confusing. Many begin studying it incorrectly and then they have to break that habit. So it's better if you start pronouncing things properly as soon as possible. It can help to imitate the way French persons speak English. This is not to be rude or mean or anything like that. You're doing this to learn how to make natural French sounds, saying the telephone lets you understand that TH is not pronounced the same way in French as in English. Tip number 2. Grammar is easier to learn if you understand the grammar of your own language. So check out our English grammar series. The more languages you learn, you start to notice things that they all have in common. All languages have the way to express an action, a verb. You can say whether something is happening now, or in the future, or in the past. All languages have a way of identifying the subject, who or what is doing the action. Next comes replacing that subject with a pronoun. Luke went to the store. He went to the store. Soon you figure out that there isn't that much grammar to learn, and you can pick up a lot of it by practicing properly constructed sentences, like good sentences you talk about. Another thing you get more relaxed about once you learn more is the number. Each language has its own number system. Some will feel more comfortable for you because it's similar to your native language. Others, well, you learn how to count by 20s and subject 10 or whatever. You can do it. Tip 3. Build your vocabulary. This year begin. This year part of learning a language that will take you the longest. In fact, you might never be finished building your vocabulary. The trick is knowing where to start. It turns out the great majority of the time you use a very small number of words. Linguists have analyzed for the frequency in English, French, or the major languages. By learning the 100 most common words, you'll be able to understand about 50% of the language. That's an incredible hard start. Learn the 500 most common words, and now you understand 67%. 1,000 words gets you to 75%. Buy a frequency dictionary and commit yourself to learn the 100 most common word, then the 500 common word, then the 1,000 common. This will pay off rapidly. The best way to learn vocabulary is flashcards and repetition. Watch a video on flashcards to get some pointer and how to use them more efficiently. We suggest you focus on phrases that's used for vocab terms rather than individual words. This is much more powerful, both because it helps your memory to learn a word in context and because phrases can immediately be used in speaking and writing. Those cheap little phrase books really come in hand here. You might be surprised to find you already know many of the words in your new language. About 30% of English words are derived from French, 30% from Latin, and 30% from Germanic languages. This isn't going to help you very much if you learning, say, Russian or Japanese. However, one interesting side benefit from learning such a different language is you acquire a new way to express an idea. For instance, the Japanese term wabi-sabi refers to the beauty in the imperfection. There's no denying if you speak English, you can get by many places. But to be a true citizen of the world, you want to be able to say bonjour, konnichiwa, hola, guten tag, bonjour. Being able to make yourself understood is an important part of being a great student. Ciao.